Bonjour, chers collègues. Je suis heureuse de vous présenter aujourd'hui le projet de loi S-229, la loi sur le parc de la Gatineau. J'ai présenté ce projet de loi il y a quelques mois à peine avant la prorogation du Parlement. J'espère que cette fois-ci, nous aurons la chance, en tant que sénateur, d'étudier le projet de loi et de l'envoyer à l'autre chambre pour que finalement, le parc de la Gatineau reçoive toutes les protections qu'un parc national mérite. Aujourd'hui, je me concentrerai sur les raisons d'être du projet de loi, les points centraux et les petits changements qui ont été apportés pour cette version qui a été déposée. I want to remind this chamber that I present this bill to the Senate through a very close relation and collaboration with Sophie Châtel, the MP for the riding of Pontiac-Kitigan-CB, which encompasses a large part of the Gatineau Park itself. I would like to start by recognizing that Gatineau Park is located on the traditional ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe Nation, who inhabited the land for over 6,000 years before the creation of Canada, and were later displaced. To this day, Anishinaabe communities live in and around Gatineau Park and continue to protect the land. I'm pleased to announce that this bill comes with a letter of support from Chief Jangi White Duck on behalf of the Kitigan-Zibi Anishinaabe Band Council. Let's start, and let me remind you the bigger context and on the importance of this bill. By now, you are all aware, through speeches and through the news, that this year an early wildfire season has brought 1,032 fires in Canada, out of which 72 remain uncontrolled today. The science is unequivocal. Global warming, biodiversity loss, pollution, ocean acidification has exceeded planetary limits. The planet is warming, and this in turn is triggering a series of negative impacts on natural ecosystems. Global biodiversity is rapidly declining, leading many experts to declare that we are witnessing the sixth mass extinction. In fact, scientists are predicting that more than 1 million species are currently on track for extinction in the coming decades. How sad that is. This is a crisis with unimaginable consequences. Humanity depends on biodiversity in countless ways, whether it is through pollination of plants and crops for agriculture, regulation of air quality that we breathe, water and soil quality, and on natural resources. The loss of ecological diversity will make our ecosystem less resilient and will worsen our economies and health. Indeed, by now, I hope, colleagues, that it is clear for you that our society, culture, and our economy depends on nature and not the other way around. GDP, the master indicator for financiers and for politicians, is based on the economy generated by nature in the form of natural resources, biodiversity, ecological services. Maybe this is not yet so clear for many of you, but it's clear, let me tell you, for most of people that we live in Quebec. Let me tell you, Hydro-Quebec profits are between 2 and 3 billion per year. Hydro-Quebec couldn't make those profits if we didn't have the mighty rivers where to build dams. It's an ecological service. 90% of the Canadian production of maple syrup belongs to Quebec, and we have account for the most of the global international production, and it creates a profit of 1 billion per year. Quebec mining sector generates 11.9 billion in mineral production, making it the second largest metal mining producer in Canada. Can you imagine the economy of Quebec without all of this? When we export non-renewable resources, like, for example, raw minerals, we know that we are taking from the economy of future generations, because these non-renewable resources don't come back. And if they come back, they come transformed, and they are sold to us at a very, very high price. My interventions through international scientific engineering and parliamentary platforms allows me to say that this is something that is more and more understood by the international community, in both, in the global north, like in Europe, and in the global south, like in Africa and Latin America. The world has tried to tackle the issue of nature and biodiversity loss through the Conference of the Parties, also known as COP, the Convention on Biological Diversity. In 2022, Canada hosted COP15 on biodiversity, and 196 countries present adopted the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The framework's most notable objective is to protect 30% of lands, 30% of waters by 2030. In October last year, the world gathered in Colombia for COP16, and I had a very good time with my colleague Andrew Cardoso, where countries continue negotiations on biodiversity and push for more financing on nature loss prevention and regeneration. Senator Cardoso and I were part of the Canadian delegation, and we witnessed firsthand the incredible work being done to connect humanity with nature. In fact, I should say reconnect, not connect, reconnect humanity with nature. Il reste un long chemin à parcourir pour atteindre nos objectifs et retrouver l'équilibre entre l'humanité et la nature. Mais cela doit commencer ici même, chez nous. Le Canada s'est engagé à atteindre l'objectif 30-30 et progresse trop lentement dans la protection de ces terres et de ces eaux. Can you imagine what we have lost with these wildfires going on this early spring? L'année dernière, le gouvernement a publié les derniers indicateurs canadiens de durabilité de l'environnement pour les aires conservées. Bien qu'il y ait eu une augmentation significative des aires marines protégées au cours de la dernière décennie, nous sommes encore loin de l'objectif avec seulement 14,7% du territoire marin conservé. En ce qui concerne les zones terrestres, le Canada en a conservé 13,7%. À seulement 5 ans de l'échéance 2030, nous avons beaucoup de rattrapage à faire. En Outaouais, juste ici en face, pas loin de chez nous, le portrait de la conservation n'est pas non plus à l'auteur de ce qui est prévu. Seulement 7,6% de la région de l'Outaouais et moins de 9% du bassin versant de la rivière des Outaouais sont actuellement protégés. Pourtant, la région de la capitale nationale devrait être un exemple pour le reste du pays. Comme j'ai dit, ça doit commencer par ici. Je vous invite fortement à aller visiter le parc de la Gatineau. Je sais que mes collègues qui habitent ici à Ottawa, ils le connaissent très bien, mais c'est tellement proche. Et je pense à ma collègue Dicon qui nous dit « Sortez, faites de l'exercice, allez marcher, allez prendre de l'air ». Au Canada, il y a aussi un besoin urgent de s'attaquer plus fermement à la perte de biodiversité. À travers le pays, plus de 520 espèces de plantes et des animaux sont en péril selon les registres publics. Le parc de la Gatineau, de ses 360 km², héberge plus de 50 lacs et bon nombre de zones humides, ruisseaux et rivières. 5 des écosystèmes et 2 des habitats au parc sont de grande importance écologique. Il y a plus de 50 espèces mammifères, une dizaine d'espèces de reptiles, 15 espèces d'amphibiens, près de 230 espèces d'oiseaux et des milliers d'invertébrés. On y retrouve également 1000 espèces de plantes et 50 espèces d'arbres. Ce matin, aujourd'hui, aux conférences de presse qu'on a eues au parc de la Gatineau, on a vu l'une de ces tortues-là. Tout le monde regardait, elle était toute seule, comme si c'était un être étrange à regarder. Et pourtant, je me rappelle, 40 ans passés, depuis que je suis ici au Canada, on trouvait des tortues partout. Le parc bénéficie d'une belle diversité biologique, mais celle-ci est à risque. Quelques 90 plantes et 60 espèces d'animaux sont menacées, dont les genévriers de Virginie, les faucons pèlerins, la hélianthre escrofuleux, excusez-moi la prononciation, la tortue mouchetée et la couleuvre tachetée. Le parc de la Gatineau est d'un valeur écologique inestimable pour la région et il faut en assurer sa protection. As I explained in my last speech on the bill, Gatineau Park is not officially a national park, and even this morning, some people believe that it is a national park. It is not. It is not enshrined in legislation and does not benefit from any formal legal status granted to other national parks, even though it is the second most visited park in whole Canada, with 2.6 million visits recorded annually. Dear colleagues, this needs to be rectified. Bill S-229 includes five main actions. It establishes Gatineau Park in federal legislation and dedicates it to all Canadians and to future generations. It is important to preserve the park for decades and centuries to come. It ensures that ecological integrity is the primary focus of park management. We cannot benefit from the park if its ecosystem collapses. It establishes the park boundaries in federal legislation and stipulates that these boundaries may only be reduced by legislation, subject to certain exceptions, such as, for example, the development of public health care facilities or public infrastructure. It strengthens ties and cooperation between the National Capital Commission and the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation in the region, as well as with neighboring municipalities. We all know we must progress reconciliation. And finally, it authorizes the implementation of regulation to control activities in the park and to set the fees to be charged, as is in the case in all the Canada's national parks. Of course, these actions have been selected after several consultations with the Kitigan-Zibi Anishinaabe community, regional environmental organizations, with the National Capital Commission, with residents associations in the area, with neighboring municipalities, and both federal and provincial elected representatives from the nation, all this done by MP Chattel. These consultations have continued since the first introduction of the bill and have led to two small changes in the version I introduced in the Senate this week. First, this new bill does not include the previously proposed provisions that the NCC, the authority to negotiate rights of first refusal with private landowners. Although the NCC already has that power and has occasionally done so with former residents, the inclusion of this provision was not well received by some residents of the park. The second change is further clarification on the language related to usage fees set by the NCC. The bill grants the NCC the authority to set fees for certain activities in the park, just as is the case for any other national park. However, in order to ensure that the access to the park remains affordable for all, this new version includes a clarification that these fees cannot exceed the cost incurred by the NCC for providing these same services. As stewards of this public park, it will be reasonable for the NCC to recover costs, but not to make a profit. Je vais parler des appuis. Je peux évidemment vanter les bienfaits et l'importance de notre proposition législative, mais il faut noter que le projet de loi bénéficie de multiples appuis importants dans la communauté. Le conseil municipal de la ville de Gatineau a adopté en novembre 2023 une résolution demandant au Parlement du Canada d'adopter une loi pour assurer la pérennité et l'intégrité des limites du parc de la Gatineau afin de garantir aux générations présentes et futures de pouvoir continuer à profiter de ces milieux naturels d'exception que représente le parc de la Gatineau. Une majorité des élus de la région de la capitale nationale soutiennent également cette initiative, comme on l'a vu ce matin au parc lors de la conférence de presse. Depuis mars 2023, plusieurs pétitions demandent de garantir la protection du parc par une loi ont été déposées à la Chambre des communes. Plus de 4 550 signatures ont déjà été recueillies. Finalement, les chefs de Kitigan, Sibi, Janki, White Duck et les chefs de Lac Barrière, Casey Rat ont tous deux offert des recommandations qui ont été intégrées au projet de loi. Leur appui à ce projet de loi est primordial. I believe this is a bill that we can collectively support. I keep calling it a low-hanging fruit. We are very much behind on our goal of 30 by 30. In the past couple of decades, several legislative attempts have been made to protect Gatineau Park. There has been liberal attempts, conservative attempts, and before the prorogation, an independent attempt. But none have reached the end of the legislative process to receive royal assent. We have to move. We have to push. We have to make this effort here, today. The last attempt before Sophie Chatel and I took on this initiative was a government bill under former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. In the past few years at the Senate, we have adopted several bills that created or expanded urban parks and national parks. And I'm very well placed to know this as the chair of the Energy, Environment and Natural Resources Committee. This legislative proposal concerns a park that already exists and that, in the minds of many, as I said earlier, is already a protected area. We merely need to formalize this in federal legislation. Colleagues, in the past few months, we have been talking about nation-building projects, projects that reinforce Canadian and regional identities. Again, when I go outside into foreign countries, what everybody thinks and imagines about Canada. Forests, rivers, lakes, nature. These build our identity. Nature is our identity. Gatineau Park is a natural gem of the National Capital Region and a key natural element of this region. It is part of what makes the Outaouais an incredible place to live, work, and play. Enjoy life. It is also of great historical significance for the entire country, serving as a home to several national heritage sites and having hosted the Mitch Lake Accord discussions in the late 1980s. I hope that you will join me in this endeavor to ensure Gatineau Park's ecological integrity so that Canadians can enjoy the wonders and the beauty of the park for generations to come. I ask you, my fellow colleagues, to move this important and easy piece of legislation forward and quickly, to refer this to the Standing Committee on Energy, the Environment and Natural Resources. Let's give our national capital a true national park of its own. Thank you. Merci. Bewitch.